Hello, everyone, and welcome to Front Seat to Climate Change. I'm your host, Mahin Azam Khan. Gilgit-Baltistan has once again been hit by devastating floods and glacial lake outburst floods, damaging homes, roads, bridges, and livelihoods across the region. For many communities, these disasters are no longer isolated events. They're becoming a recurring reality. As temperatures continue to rise and glaciers melt at an accelerating pace, the risks facing Pakistan's northern mountain regions are only expected to grow. Yet these disasters raise an important question. Are we treating them as isolated emergencies, or are we planning for the long-term climate risks they represent? Climate resilience isn't built after a disaster. It begins with the decisions governments make through budgeting, planning, and investing in prevention before the next crisis strikes. In today's episode, we'll examine whether Pakistan's climate spending reflects the scale of these growing risks, whether adaptation initiatives like GLOF 2 are delivering lasting protection, and what more needs to be done to strengthen disaster preparedness, particularly in vulnerable regions such as Gilgit-Baltistan. Joining me today is Pervez, Head of the Division for International Climate Policy at Climate Watch. Today we'll discuss what the recent floods in Gilgit-Baltistan tell us about Pakistan's preparedness, where the biggest policy and financing gaps remain, and what it will take to move from reacting to disasters to anticipating them. Hello Danish, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Mahin. Thank you so much for inviting.
No worries. So Gilgit-Baltistan has, once again witnessed devastating floods and glacial lake outburst floods this year. Despite these recurring disasters, are we still treating them as isolated emergencies rather than evidence of a long-term climate crisis?
Yes, unfortunately we are, because I guess history has taught us something which is really not helping the local people, and the anticipatory action from the government, from the institutions that are working already there. And we are still dealing with the floods as something of an emergency rather than something that's part of the climate system there. I myself am a climate refugee from 2010, and I know how it feels to have these floods on the calendar every year, and especially in summers. Not only the floods, but also the GLOFs are really part of the calendar now, and it's really devastating to see that the government, especially Gilgit-Baltistan government, is treating it as something which is just in view when it's only an emergency. When it's not an emergency, it's something that's not bothering them, because now it feels like a seasonal problem for them. So for now, I would say climate change is no longer something for a person from Gilgit-Baltistan that's going to come tomorrow. It's something that's part of the calendar that we already have every summer. It's shaping our today. It's shaping our tomorrow. It's shaping our resilience. It's shaping the school systems that we study in. It's shaping the food chain that we have, and the connectivity to the rest of the country.
Like you rightfully said, that it's shaping pretty much everything that we do, and it's not a distant threat. And it's just not about Gilgit-Baltistan, but all the provinces in Pakistan are, facing climate crisis. And this brings me to my, other question that, what happens in Gilgit-Baltistan also actually raises a bigger national question about how Pakistan actually prepares for the climate disasters as well. Pakistan has experienced repeated climate disasters over the past few years. Yet, many argue that public spending still prioritizes relief and recovery over prevention. We do not adapt, and we do not accept the anticipatory approach till now. So has Pakistan, do you think, truly shifted towards disaster risk reduction, or are we still responding after the damage is done?
I'd be very fair. We have made some progress in the last decade, and I think there are projects like the GLOF 2 which are really helping the people. And I think we have made progress on paper much more than on ground, because early warning systems and all these kind of things are not just infrastructures, but these are technologies, these are instruments that are going to be used to uplift the lives of the people, save them, and earn them some time before disaster happens. So because most of these projects are donor dependent. On the other hand, our government is also collecting levies and in the name of climate change. But most of the projects in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral are heavily relying on donors such as GCF, donations, or funds from loss and damage, probably now. and that's not bridging the gap between the needs and the action. So the real measure is not what we spend after the floods. I think for me, as an anticipatory policy advisor, we measure our success when we invest in precursor events or in preventive measures. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. And you just mentioned that a lot of projects are donor dependent and they depend on money, right? So that naturally brings us to the issue of money because preparedness ultimately, it of course depends on where governments choose to invest, right? So this year, the federal government expects to generate around rupees 50 billion through the climate support levy, which you also mentioned, while the Ministry of Climate Change's development allocation stands at approximately rupees 2.478 billion. What does this tell us about Pakistan's climate, budgeting priorities?
I think this is really distressing for me because we are collecting like 50 billion rupees and spending just 2.478
Yeah, absolutely.
billion on for the climate ministry. And to your surprise, I guess out of this 2.48, 95% of the budget is going to the Green Pakistan, which is again the 1 billion tree tsunami, which is not solving any climate crisis. It's not building any resilience within the hierarchy of Ministry of Climate Change. It's not capacitating them. It's not giving them any technology transfer. It's not going into the research within climate crisis and responding to the climate crisis. So this feels like an issue of transparency because climate levies could generate like more than 50 billion PKR if you start collecting them because now it's an existential threat for us. But the budget allocation tells you the priorities
Yeah.
because now I feel like 80% of the budget in the last decade was somehow deducted, and we came from 14 billion to 2 billion. From 2022, it was 14 point something billion PKR, and now it's 2.48, which is an alarming situation for us because the amount of hazards and the GLOF events and floods are the frequency is growing rather than shrinking, and the budget is shrinking,
Yeah.
which is, I guess, if it's called a climate levy, then people should clearly see where the climate benefits are, because this budget is going to fill the weaknesses of the macro economic, drawbacks, or I should say, the fiscal deficit.
Yeah, and I think beyond how much money is collected, the bigger question is actually how that money is used, right? We are
Yeah.
still using a lot of that money and we're still allocating that money towards mitigation rather than adaptation, which is actually, the need of the hour, especially in regions like Gilgit-Baltistan,
Yeah.
because we need to adapt to the disasters that are coming. And we know that this is going to come every year. And like you mentioned, that this has also become a part of our calendar years. And it's not
That's
something seasonal at all. So, should revenues raised through the climate support levy be ring fenced specifically for climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and resilience? Or is there a case for leaving these funds within the broader federal budget?
I think yes, at least a minimum protection should be given to these budgets because I know there are issues related to environment. There are other issues, the mitigation thing, adaptation funds that they're going to use for a lot of projects which are somehow proactive or preventive measures. But I think there should be at least a fence for the budgets which are collected on the name of climate levy, because environment is completely a different thing from climate.
Yeah.
So you should have your priorities set in addition to adaptation, disaster risk reduction, anticipatory action. All these things need, like, stable funding. Other than that, if you're somehow putting this budget in the development budget, it could be, I would say, untrackable anymore. And Pakistan already suffering from climate crisis, and it's losing a lot of infrastructure every year. And now fund for responding to the loss and damage. Pakistan has submitted three applications worth, I guess, $68 million or something, and Gilgit-Baltistan is still not there.
Yeah.
So it shows the priority of the governments, of the federal and GB governments of how this climate levy and the fundings are working. So flexibility is somehow sure acceptable, but sometimes politicians are going towards opacity and they hide these funds in some sort of, I don't know, shadows, which we climate people who are working in mainstream climate spaces are not seeing it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there should be some level of transparency and we should know where the funds are going. And, there should be a level of risk zoning as well, so
Mhm.
that the zones that are most risky, they should get the most budget when it comes to, especially climate adaptation.
Yeah,
While we're on this, I would like to sort of bring the discussion back to Gilgit-Baltistan, where climate risks, like we know, are becoming increasingly severe. And Gilgit-Baltistan has presented a 3-month interim budget with a full budget expected later this year. So, as policymakers prepare that budget, what climate investments should be treated as non-negotiable for Gilgit-Baltistan?
um, I'd prioritize it into 3 to 4 things that need to be prioritized there because climate budget is not only climate budget, it's the spending on either saving lives or earning them some time. So first, I would say some sort of glacier monitoring systems because now
Yeah.
the glaciers are because Gilgit-Baltistan, experienced 1.6 degrees Celsius increasement in the temperature from 1980s to 2020. So it's like a dramatic, and the rest of the country just 0.6 degrees Celsius, which is a dramatic change for glaciers like ours, because we have debris on top, and then this temperature is some sort of um, increasing it dramatically. So there are glacial lakes forming beneath the debris, and there are glacial lakes which are forming in just a week, and then the natural wall, which is protecting them, is bursting. So I would say better glacier and hazard mapping first, or monitoring. That could be something that we start with, that your glaciers, you have 13,000 glaciers, but you can have some risk zones, which we call the ARZs, and then you can monitor them throughout the year, not only just when the disasters are about
Right.
to happen. Second
Yeah.
thing could be end-to-end early warning systems, because
Yes.
EWS are earning a lot of time for the people,
Yeah.
and it's not about earning time, but it's also about how you respond to the disaster. So the first line of defense is the early warning systems, and the second line of defense is the trained people who are on ground
On
with
ground.
the
Yeah.
system, with the maintenance, with the trained people. As I said, the first defense line, the responders. The third would be the climate resilient infrastructure, which is really important for me because Gilgit-Baltistan has 13,000 glaciers on the mountains.
Yeah.
And then we have 300 to 400 glacier lakes. Recently, I guess you saw this news on TV that Sparker found 16 glacier lakes in just 2 weeks. So it's rapid. So we want climate resilient infrastructures because if you see almost like every major road that connects Gilgit-Baltistan to the country is blocked now, either due
Yeah.
to the rise of the sea or GLOFs. So what we could do is plan a climate resilient infrastructure in that region, which could help the people because buying equipment is so easy. You can spend money post-disaster or pre-disaster, but building resilient institutions and resilient infrastructure is something that needs to be prioritized for the long term and for the good of the people.
Just adding to what you said, in countries like Pakistan, resources will always be limited, right? So difficult
Mhm.
choices will have to be made. And if we have fiscal resources that are limited, where every rupee has to be counted, where it has to be spent, what do you think would have the greatest impact about the adaptation measures that you just mentioned, such as, strengthening early warning systems, climate resilient infrastructure, glacier monitoring, institutional capacity, or, community preparedness?
Well, I think I would make first use of the existing systems because I'm not saying the existing systems did not work at all. They are working. They're saving a lot of people. But of course, there are temporal gaps that can be filled. with technology, with upgradation, because some static projects or some static technology cannot help you for the long term. So what I would do is probably I'd suggest the government to use the existing working systems, invest in them. For instance, the early warning systems that have been that installed like in 25 villages or 25 places, for instance. So how many early warning systems are functioning there? If
Yeah.
not, then I would invest on that. And where can I integrate technology? Because under the Warsaw International Mechanism, you have to transfer technology into the early warning systems before 2027, because that's the deadline. So I think
Absolutely.
what I would do is probably use the existing working system, upgrade it to a level where I can see, yeah, that's the limitation, and then introduce new technology. For instance, now the Climate Watch is working on something which will be based on machine learning, and then it will incorporate some drone systems to monitor these floods and GLOFs, and that will be precursor, which means that will be preventive, not proactive. So
Yeah.
there are things that can be introduced, but first, if we have budget constraints, if we have constraints spending more, then I think the post-disaster things should be somehow managed, because if you see, Gilgit-Baltistan spent like 708 million Pakistani rupees on post-disaster preparedness, like heavy machinery, drone systems, and a lot of
Yeah.
things which are not going to pay them, because once the structure is broken, you can't do anything. So the best investment is actually the past work and the active work that you are doing, rather than doing the procurement and doing all the feasibility reports and then bringing the technology, testing it for years, because you're going to deal with the people. It should be people centric. So yeah,
Absolutely, I think anticipatory approach is what we should invest in.
yeah.
And one of Pakistan's biggest adaptation investments has already, focused on some of these priorities. So the GLOF 2 project is often cited as one of Pakistan's flagship climate adaptation initiative. So should the conversation now move beyond whether early warning systems were installed to whether are they still operational and protecting communities today?
I guess installations should not be dealt as a final measure, because
Yeah.
installations are just the beginning of something. And through the experience, I guess installation is not earning the trust of the community, because in the end, you have the community responding to that siren or that early warning system. So you have to earn some trust as well. So I think, yeah, GLOF made some good contributions, but I wouldn't say GLOF was an extraordinary project, which
Yeah.
I think the Prime Minister office also agreed upon, and they have a parliamentary committee which is looking into it. And now there are talks around that GLOF 3 is coming with a bigger budget. So I think installation should not be the final core or the final result as an outcome. But now I think upgradation of that installation and seeing, did it work? How many people were saved? Did that earn good time? Because just 3 days ago in my village, there was an early warning system. People were sleeping, and then the flash flood came. It didn't work. They were sleeping early in the morning. When they came out, everything was like
They're destroyed.
demolished.
Yeah.
So and same happened in Talidas,
Yeah.
where like a shepherd helped the people from the mountain, saying that there's something is coming. There is a lot of water coming towards you. You have to get out. And then the whole village was wiped out. So I think early warning systems should not be measured on where they are installed, how many are there in the region, but about the functionality. And then I think about the upgradation of that
Yeah.
technology. I think installing a siren is not a success for me, at least.
Absolutely.
Protecting lives is a success for uh, for for me as a resident of Gilgit-Baltistan and as a person who is in the climate space.
Absolutely. You also mentioned that, GLOF had some issues and some problems which were sort of agreed upon with the Prime Minister's office as well. And you also mentioned that some of the systems were no longer functioning. So that also obviously raises an extremely important question about accountability. There have been concerns about, non-functional early warning infrastructure in some areas, and some examples that you just provided us. In your view, where does accountability ultimately lie then? with project implementation, long-term maintenance, institutional ownership, or last mile communication with communities?
I would say everyone has a unique responsibility in here because implementers are responsible for the installation, the procurement, designing the project, and then making it feasible for the region. And then the government has a response that they have to maintain it. They have to give you the emergency responses, and the community has a responsibility of participating in it and contributing to it. So I think the line of contribution or the line of responsibility should be drawn all the way, and it should
Yeah,
be maintained for every um, contributor. But for me, I think responsibility is much bigger than accountability,
yes,
because in
yeah,
the end, you have to save lives, and the people need to be prepared um, for participation. In GLOF 2 project, there was zero element of consultation toolkits, which were really obsolete. The people
yeah.
were just consulted, but they were not taken as partners who understand the region. I know my region, where to, escape, how to escape, which route to take, and historical indigenous knowledge that I have, like where the floods can come from, where the risk is low, and all these. This should be a preamble within the procurement policy. Um, I think shared responsibility should never become something that nobody is accountable for or responsible for. It should always be something that needs to be taken into account from the very first day, I guess. Because if I were to take some technology into that area, I would definitely seek an external advisory on rather this technology is going to work for the people, and if the people are ready for that, because sometimes it's just an alien project for them, so they just show responses for 2 years and then they would be like, we are not going to support this anymore, or we are not going to use this anymore. So the community is really important to consult with.
Of course, I think the community is extremely important to consult with because they are the ones, like you just mentioned, who have indigenous knowledge about the region, and they're the ones who are actually experiencing this. So the knowledge and the experience that they can provide, other people, outsiders cannot tell us, what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what you also said, that it has to be a shared responsibilities. All the stakeholders in the society have to play their part because climate change is something that we all are facing and we all have to play our part in it.
Mhm.
So ultimately, accountability should also be reflected in how we actually measure success, right? So we are just discussing how projects like GLOFs should do better and can do better in terms of accountability, in terms of success, in terms of including all the stakeholders of the society as well. So, how should projects like GLOF 2 actually be evaluated then? Is success measured by the numbers of system installed or by whether they continue to deliver, deliver timely warnings, and ultimately save lives?
As I said, we should measure the outcomes and not the equipments, like how many early warning systems have been installed there, how many projects are running in general. Rather, the parameter should be how many lives were saved, how many people were trained, and evacuation methods and emergency, if the emergency warnings are working and people are responding to it, and if the warning is reaching on time and earning them some sort of latency. And then I think that should be the parameter rather than saying, okay, we spent $35 million, we did 50 projects, and under those 50 projects, we installed 2,500 early warning systems, which I think most of them are, as I said,
Sure.
I'm not saying it out of thin air. It's just like there are proven examples that these early warning systems are not working for the people, which
Yeah.
is dangerous because people are dependent on these early warning systems and they're sleeping in their homes. They're ignoring their indigenous knowledge because I remember in 2010 when we would go to sleep, somebody would be there uh, to monitor it. Now the early warning systems are there, so they just go to sleep, and then that's becoming a major threat, a risk for the people because they're dependent on that. So the true indicator should not be the hardware that we are installing there. It's how many lives have we protected? What were the outcomes from that? Are the people more dependent on the early warning systems, or they're learning from something from that? Are they responding to it, or they are relying on it? And the
Yeah.
third question could be, if we have installed some technology like 10 years ago, is it still viable in that region? Because climate is changing, and the rapid GLOFs are a part of the calendar, as I said. So we have to not simply count how many systems have we installed, but see if it's feasible to keep going with them. And yeah.
And technology infrastructure only a part of the picture, right? The people living in these regions have generations of experience adapting to these landscapes as well. And I think you mentioned something that you know your region because, of course, like you've grown up over there. And you've also worked closely with communities in Gilgit-Baltistan. How well is local knowledge reflected in Pakistan's disaster risk reduction policies? And what lessons do you think that policymakers are still overlooking?
As I said, I mentioned earlier, it's being really ignored in projects which are part of the rehabilitation process and preventive measures as well. Local knowledge is one of the greatest assets for us. Even if we ignore it, it's still there. It's not going to go anywhere because it's part of the civilization for thousands of years, and it's going to be part of the civilization for coming years as well. Um, I live here in Germany and we work with international NGOs. They are documenting the local knowledges to make the projects more viable, to make the projects more adaptable and more trustworthy. As I said, these projects seem to be very alien for us, for a person like me. They curtain off the early warning systems, that's it. They install it, they just put some bars and they say, okay, this is for you. That's not going to happen, I guess. People should be trained. I love the work that Aga Khan Agency is doing over there because they have local volunteers, they have training material for the local volunteers, they include the whole community. Although there are some drawbacks, and I disagree with the consultation tools that they use, but I think communities know the flood routes better than us. So we cannot come up with GIS and then go there and say, okay, this is the 3D model, so the floods are going to come from this route. No, because the people know. They know it from the core of the mountain, where the sound is going to come from, how much time would it take to reach, and everything, I guess. So resilience building is not something just communities work for. They have been living with it. So it's something that has been part of their culture. It's been something that's part of their living for centuries. So we cannot ignore that. That's why I guess there should be an integration of local knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, or formerly the traditional ecological knowledge, should be integrated into projects and consultation tools that we use prior to the project implementation.
I think when every policy is also adapted, we should have representation from every province, right? And especially from regions that are highly impacted by climate change, so that we can actually include what they have to say, we can include their indigenous knowledge, and we can also include their experience as well. Unless we do not do that, I don't think we can come up with accurate policies for that region because every region faces climate change in a different manner and every region has different risks as well. And I think what we also do is that we rely on outside knowledge and we rely on external countries and external funding to actually tell us that this is what we need to do in specific regions. And I think it's time that we start relying on our local indigenous knowledge and we start giving more representations, whether it's Gilgit-Baltistan, it's Balochistan, it's Sindh, and whether it's Punjab. So looking ahead, the challenges are only expected to grow as climate change accelerates. So climate projections suggest that glacial related hazards will also, of course, increase and they will become more frequent in the years ahead. Coming back to a broad description of what Pakistan's institutions are doing, do you think that they're planning for tomorrow's risks or are they still preparing for yesterday's disasters?
First, I guess we have to distinguish between what tomorrow is going to look like and what yesterday looked like, because tomorrow's disaster won't look like yesterday's, and they're not going to replicate what happened yesterday, but somehow the intensity of tomorrow is going to be bigger, much bigger and different, because climate crisis is some sort of not going declining, but the temperature is going to rise up. So I think climate change needs to be, or the climate disasters need to be analyzed on multiple levels, because what we call the complex hazards, multi-hazard analysis. So if we are doing multi-hazard analysis, for instance, GLOFs are coming, flash floods, and then landslidings, and then you have rainfall patterns which are not helping the people. Even the crops are destroyed. So the food chain is also getting affected, and then the routes are getting affected. So they don't have any connectivity with the rest of the country. So all these things are somehow connected. So what I see is the government, especially in Gilgit-Baltistan, because of course federal needs to coordinate with the provincial or the local government. They don't have a pre-disaster preparedness plan that, as of now, because recently we dissected the federal budget, the federal budget and the provincial budget of Gilgit-Baltistan as well, and it's an interim budget, I know, but the wordings are going to change, but not the whole structure of the budget. So it gives you an overview of what are the priorities of the government. So most of the budget is going into post-disaster management or post-disaster response, which is not going to help the people because they are already displaced. So what you're giving them is something to survive, not to build resilience. If it is survival, then it should be, designed in such a way that the survival is, achieved there. But what I think is the national government is also some sort of going away from the pre-disaster planning, and now they're focusing more on the post-disaster planning. I don't know. There could be a lot of factors in there. There could
Yeah.
be a shift of understanding, a shift of the science that they get from these regions. But for someone like me, who is coming from that region, who has worked there, as you said, across Balochistan, in Dia Khan, I've been there, in Sindh, I've been there, I've been to KP, I've been to Balochistan. I've seen quite complex things at a time. So I think if we are planning for yesterday's floods, and tomorrow's risk is overdue, it's gonna come. So we are already behind, and it's gonna change the dynamic of the country. And it's not only about the survival of the people, but it's about the survival of the country, because we have lost like 360 to 370 billion dollars from the economy in the last decade. So if we keep it like this and it's still wiping out, I guess there's no way uh, back to resilience.
Absolutely. And I think this shouldn't be our approach. Survival shouldn't be our approach, right? Our approach should be adaptation.
Yeah.
And we keep on mentioning and we keep on saying that, these communities are resilient. Of course, they're resilient, but they were forced to be resilient, right? No communities or no community ever wants to be resilient in this manner, right? Everyone deserves to feel safe where they live. And no community deserves to feel like that, right?
Mine is there is a problem. If you see the resilient word, that there needs to be sustainability in front of it, because
Yes,
resilience is not going to help us. Sustainable
exactly.
resilience is going to help us. For instance, if I give you an example, like there was a school which was destroyed in 2010. One of my school was destroyed. I was out of school for 7 months. Was it sustainable? No.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
did the flood keep happening for 7 months? No. So we have to see if destroyed schools in 2010 are still rehabilitating in 2025. Then it's, I guess, the lack of interest and the lack of transparency in the systems, in the structures.
Absolutely. I think we need to stop glorifying the word resilient
Yeah, yeah.
and we need to start focusing on sustainability, like you just
Mhm.
mentioned. Finally, just to wrap up the conversation, if you had the opportunity to shape the country's priorities, where would you begin? If you had the opportunity to influence Pakistan's next climate budget, what is that one investment or reform you would prioritize above all others to better protect vulnerable communities, especially in your region, Gilgit-Baltistan?
I think I prioritize the anticipatory action rather than making it post-disaster action, because, as I said, we are working on some technology integrations in Gilgit to preventive measures, to upscale the preventive measures. And these early warning systems are based on completely artificial intelligence trained on ML. And I think these sort of technology transfers are going to provide us data that is not only consumable or that's not only used for anticipatory reaction, but that will be used in future as well, because these ML models, they train themselves. So technology transfer is one thing that can solve, the gap that we have, the precursor gap. The second thing that I would prioritize is, as I said, work on the existing systems that we have. Because building, as I said, if you are importing technology or if you are working on something that needs to be integrated into the system, that needs a lot of work, because we are people-centric here. We are not some commercial we are not working on some commercial production where we are going to test and trial. Here we have people to save, so we cannot trial that. Yes, we can test and trial for its efficiency, but we cannot test and trial it on the people. So the smart climate investment would be the investment on precursor or anticipatory action before the disasters rather than post disasters. And I guess we need to invest on technology, which I think is the gap. I myself am working for the last 8 years, 2 years in Germany now. So I think the climate space generally is lacking a lot of technology and a lot of anticipatory action. So I think I'd prioritize that.
I hope this actually happens in Pakistan, and I hope that we start focusing more on anticipatory action. I think Pakistan is already moving towards that direction, but we need more implementation. We need more funding when it comes to regions like Gilgit-Baltistan, and we need better implementation, because as we have deciphered in this conversation, that climate change is not a distant threat. It's reshaping everything that we do, our food systems and our lives. Thank you so much, Danish, for your brilliant conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting. It was really nice.
Gilgit-Baltistan is often described as Pakistan's front line of climate change. The floods and glacial lake outburst floods we've seen this year are a reminder that climate change is not a distant threat. It's already reshaping lives, landscapes, and livelihoods. The question now is not whether these risks will continue, but whether our policies, institutions, and investments will keep pace with them. As Pakistan prepares future budgets and climate policies, the focus must shift from reacting to disasters to anticipating them. Investing in glacier monitoring, resilient infrastructure, early warning systems, and community preparedness isn't just about protecting one region. It's about strengthening the country's overall resilience in a changing climate. Thank you for watching Front Seat to Climate Change. Until next time, I'm Mahin Azam Khan, and see you in the next episode.